Well, hello there, everybody. Josh and I have noticed that there tends to be a few common errors that newer players and even older players tend to make from time to time. So we just wanted to go over a few. We've got 10, maybe 11, depending on how we want to count this thing. And we're going to go over some stuff. Isn't that right, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how many numbers there are, but like when it comes to common, there's definitely some errors there. But like, the, can I borrow $1 right off the bat in the beginning? Fantastic. He just continued all that throughout his music career, and then I would say that the the errors that common made, the common errors, I guess if that's what we're calling it, would probably be some of the acting choices. Like, should he really have done "Now You See Me"? Happy Feet 2. I don't know, but then you have things like John Wick, John Wick 2. I think he did a really good job in that. Hell on Wheels, that he had a fantastic character in that. That started the writing kind of screwed him over towards the end, but I mean, uh, Common was great. You're sure he has some errors, but like Common, it's fantastic.
I don't know what any of that means.
Common, he was like a rapper. Now mostly he's an actor.
Josh, you know I don't know things.
That's what we're talking about, though, right?
No, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. 5e.
Oh,
Mistakes. Okay.
okay, all right, I got it. Hey everybody, I am Josh from JNJtabletop, or if you are Alco, then I am Joshua Tabletop. And with me, as always, is Jacob Tabletop. And hopefully you watched our video last week where we interviewed our friend Hidden Nerdy Side. But today, we're doing something different. Today, we're going to talk about some common mistakes, common errors that players make, and also DMs make, when playing Dungeons and Dragons. We've got a list of about 10, maybe with an extra one in there too. I don't know. And we're just going to go over that and go back and forth and just talk about what it is. So, our first common error would basically be the thought that the DM is bound by certain things. Like that you want to do your thing and you could do it because you rolled your die. No, there's something called the Rule Zero in every single RPG, or every one that I know of, I guess. Basically says that the game master or dungeon master has the freedom to change the rules as they fit, as long as it makes sense. Now, you might be thinking like, well, I had a DM that like never let me use my sneak attack, or never did this, or never did that, or the other thing. Let all the other players do cool stuff. That's a problem, DM. There's a difference between like the DM changing certain things to make it make sense, and the DM changing things to screw people over. I think the key there is consistency. DM makes a ruling on something, it needs to be a consistent ruling, unless the DM says, hey, I made a mistake on this. For the future, we're going to be doing it this way. And we're all humans. We all make mistakes like that. It happens.
Usually when I see a situation where a DM will override some kind of a rule that's in the book is because typically they have more knowledge of a certain situation than a player will. Like if they're walking in the middle of a trap or something. Like even just the other day with our Rare Drop roleplay game, you asked Vale to make a wisdom save to have him go. He was compelled to go into that dark room, which was creepy as anything. But anyways, I thought for a second, I was like, wait, he got compelled there. Maybe this is a charm effect. Vale's an elf. He's got advantage. You said it's not. Okay. That's one thing where, like, from my point of view, I could have looked at that as Josh was overriding that rule, but he had more knowledge about what was going on than I did. So both sides did exactly what they should. I wanted to be like, hey, wait a second. Maybe I should have re-rolled that saving throw. But no, he got it right. The next one that we're going to go is actually in the intro section of the player's handbook, and this is specific beats general. So many times you're going to see a situation where it seems like you have two rules that might be in direct opposition to each other. And usually you have a general way something works and then something specific for this situation. So, for example, let's take the magic missile spell. It's a first level spell for wizards, sorcerers, and maybe warlocks have it too, but that's not important. Magic missile always hits its target and deals damage. It's just what it does. It's one of the most classic spells in D&D. It's been around since the beginning, as far as I can tell, at least ever since I've been playing, and I'm old. So it always hits. That's just it. It just deals damage. But the shield spell has something specific to it. You can cast it and block it. So that's the only way a magic missile spell won't hit. So that's kind of the situation where if you have two rules that seem to conflict, which one is specific to the situation that's happening in? And that's the one that wins.
Yeah, I think specific beats general is just a good general life rule, you know. It's just, yeah, general life rule.
Nice to meet you.
And I guess number 3 on our list for common mistakes would be always round down. And this is something that I actually forget often. You'll see if you watch any of our gameplay videos, you'll probably see me give Jake a look and be like, round down, right? I'll be like, yeah, always round down.
I just give the nod of approval. Like.
Yeah. If you don't have a whole number, you round down. You never round up, whether it's hit points or whether it's damage or whatever it is. You're gonna round down, not round up, unless there's a specific rule that says, "Hey, for this, round up." And I think there are a few. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but
I can't either. But specific beats general, so that's how it goes. You never know, because this is being recorded in November of 2020. Maybe there's a sage advice that comes out later, or errata that changes something. But specific beats general. I doubt anything is going to change some of those very foundational rules, which I would think brings us to our next point here. And a lot of players, when they encounter an effect or a situation that seems like there might be magic around, they'd be like, hey, can I make an Arcana check to see if there's magic around? They feel like it's almost like you're trying to sense magic. And there's a spell for that. It's called Detect Magic. That's what that does. An Arcana check is actually your understanding about magic and spells and magic items and those kinds of things. So it's a knowledge check. You might look and see like a rune on the floor and be like, that could be a magical rune, but you have no other, like, you don't know if it's just like a painting or something like that versus an actual magical effect going on. The best I think you could probably go in that situation is say like, it could be, which is probably why you asked for the check in the first place. It really doesn't help you in that situation.
I'm a little, yeah, you're 100% right. But in a situation like that exact one, I think I'm a little bit more free with my Arcana checks, where like I wouldn't tell someone what something like that did, but if it was a magical root and they rolled well on their Arcana check, say you're not really entirely sure what this is, but you've seen some of these symbols before in runes that have been used for like, magic and some stuff like that. So like you get the idea that maybe it is like something, that kind of thing. But never give them complete information for an Arcana check. Then.
No, why take Detect Magic then?
Yeah, exactly.
This is a freebie here. If a player is trying to use or like circumvent something that's in the game already, like something like that, it's like, well, now you don't need Detect Magic because you could just roll well on an Arcana check. So you can usually tell, like, if it feels like they're trying to get around something, it might seem logical, but it's not quite right.
It ain't right.
It's just not right.
For what you're doing with that Arcana check ain't right. So next, we are going to talk about spells generally noticeable when they happen. And the reason that I could say this confidently is the fact that metamagic subtle spell exists.
What we were just talking about.
Yeah, let's think about this logically. Subtle spell basically means that you could do something, you could cast something and hide it. Well, if you need to cast something and hide it, that means that typically when you cast something, it is not hidden. If you look at the VSM on there, V is for verbal. That means that you're speaking something out loud. Yeah. If you've ever seen Lord of the Rings or Witcher or like any fantasy thing ever, when like the mages start doing their thing, everything gets all spooky and they're all like, like, and they're like saying things, or even like freaking Harry Potter, they're making noise while they're doing things. They're not like, like they're making noise. It's noticeable. It's not going to be secret.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't have a verbal component, I think Minor Illusion just has a little somatic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, if a DM wanted to say like, yeah, that's all well and good, but the somatic is like really like all over the place, like, I don't know exactly, but I think within reason and fun, you can come to a conclusion on that one. But yeah, there's like a spell voice you have to use, I think.
Yeah. You shall not. Yeah. Verbal and somatic. The only other thing that I would say, aside from the meta magic for subtle spell, is I'll let people roll. If it's not verbal, if it's somatic, I'll let you roll a sleight of hand check to try to see how well you do, how well you sneak it. And if you've seen Jake try to, I don't know if it's come up yet. I think it came up once, but when Vale uses his message or sending
message, yeah, the
message for the response, if someone wants to respond quietly, they need to roll a stealth check using their charisma modifier.
What? You can't do that. That's dexterity.
Because everything speaking in this game uses charisma. So you're trying to be sneaky, but you're trying to speak. Sounds like charisma to me. But
yeah.
That would be my two workarounds for making spells sneaky, if you will. Aside from that, people are probably going to see what you're doing.
Yeah, and I like that solution so much for a couple of reasons. Because number one, it doesn't like just squash player creativity, because not everything that a player wants to do is going to be covered in the books. So, and then also it says, all right, well, I'm not just going to let you do it. Let's roll. Let's see how that works. And I love that kind of solution. I try to do that as often as I can when I'm DMing. The next one we have is you can actually only cast one leveled spell per turn. So I know a lot of players that are newer. We have a video on the Matt Mercer effect. They have come to learn Dungeons and Dragons through Critical Role. And in campaign 1, because they were transitioning their players from Pathfinder to 5th edition, they had some other stuff going on there, and they had like a house rule where I think you could do 2 spells in one turn as long as one of them was a 2nd level spell or lower. That was a house rule. The player's handbook says for a bonus action, I feel like the wording is a little weird. A spell cast with a bonus action is especially swift. You must use a bonus action on your turn to cast the spell, provided that you haven't already taken a bonus action this turn. That's not too crazy. You can't cast another spell during the same turn except for a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action. It's a little wordy. The simple way of saying this is if you want to try and cast 2 spells in 1 turn, only one of them can use a spell slot. That's the way you can just keep that in your head, and you'll never get that wrong.
It's not that complicated, but it seems more complicated than it actually is. Like once you get into that moment where you're like, all right, I try to do these 2 things, and you're like, well, you actually can't do those 2 things. You're like, oh no, I thought I could, because it says a bonus action and an action.
Yeah.
But when you have that one time where they're like, hey, you can't do it, you should remember after that, realistically.
I would think so. I think if a player, because a very common multi-class is to dip into 2 levels of fighter for action surge, I would be like, yeah, you're cool. Do the thing. Like, drop 2 fireballs and just go. Walk away with the explosion behind you.
Yeah. Next thing I would say is probably surprise. The surprise condition, because it is a condition, is something that a lot of people get confused on. They think that there's like a surprise round and all this stuff that, you know, like if you roll well on like a sneak or something in the middle of combat, then someone might be surprised. This is chapter 9 of the Player's Handbook. Surprise is part of the order of combat. Before you roll initiative, you determine who is surprised. Basically, when you do that first round of combat, whoever is surprised has the surprise condition. They can't take actions, they can't move, they can't take reactions, they can't really do anything. You guys are able to do your thing if you're not surprised. I get why it seems like you have a surprise turn. I think maybe that's terminology from like previous editions, something like that.
That's exactly why.
Yeah. And I don't think it really hurts to call it a surprise turn, because realistically it's semantics saying that it's not a surprise turn. But it's not something that happens ever except for at the beginning of combat.
It's very confusing. The last paragraph of the surprised thing really kind of sums it up really well. If you're surprised, you can't move or take an action on your first turn of the combat, and you can't take a reaction until that turn ends. A member of a group can be surprised even if other members aren't. Like Josh was saying, like, let's say the DM is rolling, he determines, or she determines, whoever is surprised based on stealth checks and all that stuff. But you still roll initiative for that first turn, that first round. It's not like a surprise round that Josh alluded to with previous editions. It's just a condition, really. It's confusing because of the history of D&D more than it is the concept. Sneak attack is another thing that can sometimes be confusing for players, and it's one of the most foundational features of the rogue class, and it's something that gives really awesome, just one-shot damage dealing fun, and it's something to make sure you kind of get right. And it's really sort of simple. You basically, if you have advantage on your attack roll, you can deal sneak attack. If you have an enemy of the target you're hitting, he doesn't necessarily have to be your ally, but just something that is basically distracting enough, and that creature is conscious and not incapacitated in some reasons. It's a viable threat, and you don't have disadvantage. So if you have advantage, you're good. If you don't have disadvantage and there's a threat next to the target that you're trying to hit, you can do it. And the other thing is, you only can do this once per turn. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward. You know, after you just go all around the flowchart and do the things.
So the next thing that people probably get confused about, I would say, is armor class. Whether it's unarmored defense or like mage armor or any number of things that, like, it really just one of them determines your armor class, but you are now trying to combine all of these features and spells and armors. That's not how it works. If you're wearing leather, it's going to be 11 plus your dex modifier. If you're not wearing anything at all, it's going to be 10 plus your dex modifier. When it comes to unarmored defense as a class feature, if you're playing as a barbarian, it's going to be your dex modifier plus your constitution modifier plus 10, and that's going to be your AC. If you're playing as a monk, then it's going to be 10 plus your dex plus your wisdom, and that's going to be your AC. You can't combine that with mage armor or anything like that. If you're wearing armor, then that negates your unarmored defense, which is kind of in the name of it. You're either unarmored or you're armored. Some classes are better off being unarmored. Some classes are better off being armored.
Yeah, and I think mage armor too can get a little confusing. That's another unarmored defense. It just, instead of starting with a 10, it's a 13. So if you have access to a bunch of different ways you can calculate your armor class, you're allowed to choose one of them. But you get to choose that, so that's good. More choices. Hey, we got a video on player agency right there. So the next thing we're going to go over is the mirror image spell. And this is a very interesting one. It's second level on the wizard spells. I think sorcerers get it too. Maybe bards, warlocks. It's arcane. Anyways, The flavor of it is you get to create 3 illusory duplicates of yourself, and between the magic and all that stuff and what people see, nobody knows which one is the real you. So when someone attacks you, they roll a d20 to see which of the 4 of you, the actual target of the attack. So if you have 3 duplicates, it's a 6 or higher. Hit a duplicate. If it's 2 duplicates, it's 8 or higher. And if it's 1 extra duplicate, it's 11 or higher. If the attack is targeting a duplicate, it's not your AC that it uses. The formula there is 10 plus your dexterity modifier. If that attack hits, that duplicate's gone. Once it's destroyed, that's it. The other thing that's interesting about that is it says it ignores all other damage and effects. So if you are targeted by like a lightning bolt or a fireball or burning hands, some kind of area of effect that requires a saving throw, it doesn't affect any of them. So like you might think like, I'm just gonna burning hands, I'll just kill all the duplicates, it'll be great. Nope, that doesn't work. That's part of the stuff that can get a little confusing. If the AC of the duplicate is not the same as your AC, it has a different formula. It's specifically an attack roll that's targeting the duplicate, and you determine that before the whole thing goes.
Well, I just agree and say that I'd say that probably the most commonly misunderstood part of that is that it doesn't hit your AC. The first time you look at that, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna find a way to give that to Marcus. Marcus is gonna have 20 AC plus all of his duplicates are gonna have a 20 AC, and then obviously that's not correct. You just heard what it actually is. But my little rules exploit for this is the power gamer coming out of me, is Marcus has Sentinel. One of the sections of Sentinel basically says if an enemy within 5 feet of me makes an attack at any target other than me, as long as that target doesn't have the Sentinel feat, then I get to make an attack on them. So technically my mirror image is a mirror, it's not me, it does not have Sentinel. So if I have that active, they roll, they hit it, even if they destroy it, I'm getting to attack it every single time. That's getting me an extra attack on that enemy every single time they try to attack me, unless they hit me and not my mirror image. But like in the beginning, at least, the odds are in your favor that it's going to hit the mirror and not you.
Even when there's only one other one, it's still 50-50 because 11 or higher on a d20, it's a coin flip.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I feel as though, and I could totally be wrong here, and maybe there's a sage advice. If there is, let us know in the comment section. But I feel like this might be a rules as written versus rules as intended. My instinct would be to not allow that to work. But I mean, the language in the mirror image spell is very specific to calling it a separate target. So if a player tried to do that, I'd kind of be scratching my head and be like, all right, we're going to do this. And then I'll look into it afterwards or something like that and really, really nail it down. It's so nasty, though. It'd be so nasty.
And the last one on our list is something that you probably hear Jake say pretty frequently. And that is a natural 20 is not an automatic success. And there's a little bit of baggage to this, because this is the only instance in which that is true for me as a DM, if I'm DM. If a player is like, I want to roll an athletics check and jump to the moon, and they just roll a die before you say anything, and they're like, natural 20, I did it. Or, they're like, I want to go to the Escalade and drink like Hennessy or like whatever it was from that sketch.
That Key and Peele sketch is great. Oh my gosh.
Like just because you rolled the 17 doesn't mean 17 titties are going to come out. That's just not how it works. It's not how the game works. But in my opinion, you should not make players roll for something that they can't succeed at. Players just going to try to roll for it without asking, then yeah, natural 20 is not a success. But if a player asked me, they said they wanted to do something, and they're like, can I roll like an Arcana check for that? And I know in my DM brain, like, well, they weren't good. They're not going to be able to do that anyway. I don't want to give them that false hope of like, because when you do roll a natural 20, like you're like, oh, awesome, like I
the
did
emotion spike. You're like,
high
yeah,
five all around.
yeah.
So then to be that DM to be like, well, didn't matter what you rolled, like unless you had guidance, like it's.
Yeah, this is definitely something I've gotten on my soapbox about before. You know, obviously, a natural 20 does always hit, and I think that's where this probably kind of branches off into other ways of looking at it. And I think there are times and a place where you can consider it an automatic success, but that can't just be the thing. And obviously, outlandish situations, like Josh said. And there definitely are times when the DM isn't going to know what your modifier is, so they might make you roll something even if you can't. That just kind of is what it is. But a lot of times someone might get a situation where you're trying to, I don't know, look for something, and the DM might say, all right, roll an investigation check. But they might be specific with what they say. They might say, like, I'm looking for, you know, a Holy Avenger longsword that's right there. And be like, natural 20. It's like, I got it, right? It's like, no. What you did was as best as you could in searching the thing you're searching. Doesn't mean you automatically get what you said you were searching for. There's a lot of things there to just kind of temper some of the I mean, it's exciting when you roll a natural 20. It's probably the most fun thing you do in a game, but it's not always a success. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. That's just the way it is. But on that note, I think we'll end the video there, unless you got anything else you want to say, Josh.
Nope.
No.
Nothing else. Just if these are the common mistakes that we could think of, but if there are any common mistakes that are common at your table, let us know in the comments below, and maybe we'll make a video specifically about that comment. Indy is ready.
He's like, I got lots of them. He's like, I got the slobber era, all the things. But yeah, take care, everybody. We'll catch you in the next one.
Oh, thank you.
That's a good boy right there.
Good boy. You're making my rolly chair flip around. Thank you. Okay, go. Why is your head wet? Dude, you gotta get out of here. I don't know what you want from me. He's like the weird kid that had a crush on Helga and Hey Arnold. You know. Too old, okay.
Too old to begin the training. I've heard of Hey Arnold, but that's about as far as it goes.
Alright, fair enough.
Can we see Indy again?
If you want to, yeah. You guys want to see Indy?
Yeah.
Come here, boy. Come here. Okay, good boy.
That's a good boy right there.
Okay. This is my dog.
We named the dog Indiana.
Yep. His name's Henry Jones Jr. If you want to follow him on Instagram, it's Indy the Shepherd.
Yes. Definitely go show Indy some love on Instagram. We're dog people, Josh.
It's true. It's true.
We're dog people.
Good boy.